It's not small group personal training. It's individual personal training in a small group. A good trainer can handle 6-on-1. Well, I think that's the beauty of the model is its simplicity. You only need 150. And by the way, you can get there really fast. Then your job becomes just keeping them, servicing the hell out of them. And then you just focus on retention. If you do it right, and like I know in my studios, we did it right, people won't leave.
Micheal Okumian, what's up, buddy?
What's up, Rick?
Not a lot, my friend. How's Boston today?
Boston is fallish. How is
Same.
Atlanta?
It's going to be 36 tonight, which is frigid for Atlanta temperatures. I don't know if we're going to make it.
I think we're going to be I think we're like in the 40s overnight, but this weekend's going to hit 70 as a high. So,
really?
Yeah, I don't know.
Good for you guys. You'll be in bathing suits in that weather up there. Jeez.
Absolutely. You know it.
Well, hey, you know how this works. We have to start with a dad joke. You got one?
Sure. Always.
Shoot.
I'm a dad. So I don't know. For those that don't know, I have twins, boy-girl twins. And we had them around 7.5. So we had them around 40 years old. So my 40s decade has been growing my business and growing my family.
So you're a walking dad joke.
Yeah, I'm a walking dad joke. That's pretty much. But my son, he always asks what's it like to be a parent. So the other night, I woke him up at 2 a.m. and I told him I had to pee.
Hey son. Like what? Yep. I have to pee. Like, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. It's been a minute, but I remember those days.
Now with twins, because then they're both sleeping well, and then one sleeping, one night, one wakes you up. The next night you reverse to the next person, and then it just keeps going back and forth. And then one gets sick for 5 days, the other one gets sick on day 6, and right. So then you're always sick.
Like, why don't you guys get together and coordinate on your illnesses?
Just get it all at once. Just drink from the straw the same day, and then we'll just deal with it all at once. But anyway,
you ready for my dad joke?
I'm always ready for your dad jokes.
Look, I try to say mucho when I'm around my Hispanic friends. It means a lot to them. Boom. Love it. Oh, all right. Listen, we've enough nonsense. You're a super smart guy, and I want people to meet you because you and I have been friends for a while. We're going to talk about what you do ultimately, which is value businesses and put deals together and tie money to businesses that are growing and scaling. And we'll talk all about that. But it's an interesting space to be in. But I think your background in getting to this place is really interesting for me personally. So I know people would love to hear it. So if you don't mind, just share your background. How did you get to this position that you're in, and walk us through it?
Yeah. So I think I aged myself a bit. I'm in my late 40s. Through childhood, definitely was somebody that overate emotionally. Always did. The heavy kid, pudgy kid, then got heavy, lost probably 60 pounds twice in high school. Lost 60, gained 100, lost 60, gained 100. And my parents went through a really ugly divorce my senior year of high school. And that led to a bankruptcy, house repossessed. It was a really tough time in our lives. I definitely turned to food during that time. And didn't know how to eat at all, right? I wasn't working out. I wasn't into sports. I had good grades. That was something that I always took pride in. But it probably reached its pinnacle, I would say, senior year when I was going through this. My weight, I believe in my max weight, I was close to 300 pounds. I don't remember the exact number. So
that's crazy.
You can't tell. You can't tell on the screen here, but I'm about 5'9.5", 5'10" on a good day. And so carrying that much weight, I was almost like an offensive lineman. Like I was kind of just big everywhere, right? Really heavy. I'm pretty sure I had a 52 waist or something in that range. And then there was kind of just a moment I kind of remember specifically. Always, these stories are very instrumental to your life. But I remember there was a moment where I think I had no confidence in dating girls, and it was definitely driven by wanting to just have a girlfriend or kissing girls or just fooling around with, whatever it was, just being like a guy, a teenager. And I remember there was a girl I think I kind of was good friends with that I kind of liked, and I never liked myself, so it always started there. I was a popular guy, people liked me, no problem there. But just didn't like myself, so I always thought myself was disgusting. I remember one night I looked in the mirror and I really went, when you go like face to the mirror and I stared at myself and I said, "You're done. That's it. It's over." So when I made that change, and that was in January of 1997. Still remember the time. And one thing that you and I relate about, for people that may know you or not know you, one of the things that's super impressive about you is you have an incredible memory, just like me. So we can both relate to that. But I can remember all this stuff very vividly. And for about 6 months, I just ate right. No, you know what? That's not true. It was probably about 11 months I ate right. And I probably lost 60 pounds or so, just not working out, just, not eating like a kind of like a fast food type food and things like that, soda, none of that, just took it out of my diet. And it's interesting, that was my first year of college too. So it was a freshman year of college and was going through that and trying to make good choices, etc. In December of 97 is when I joined a gym. And I was in sophomore in college, and I was living next to, we went to University of Rhode Island, or I went to University of Rhode Island, and at University of Rhode Island, we have houses on the beach. So you rent a house for the season. There was a guy that was 10 years older than me that was in finance working for one of the larger companies in Rhode Island. And we kind of hit it off. He knew I was a driven guy at that age. I always was that way. And he gave me an internship. And along with that internship, he used to work out every day. He was in great shape. I mean, 6'3", like really chiseled. And so we used to go to work every day. And then after work, I'd go to his gym with him and he'd show me how to lift. And it was a typical Monday was chest and, was it back and buys on Tuesday and shoulders and tries on Wednesday and legs on Thursday. But every time after he said, "You got to do cardio. You have 30 minutes of cardio." And that was kind of the start of it. And if you fast forward about 3 months, about a month and a half later, he said to another buddy of mine, "I'll go to spring break with you." He's like, 30 and we're like 20, right? He goes, "I'll go to spring break with you if you hit your goal." So I didn't really have much money. I scrapped together as much as I could. And I bought the plane ticket and all that. And I boarded that plane. I went to the gym 97 days in a row. And I spent probably 3 hours a day there. And I was 167. I was down about 130 pounds. So I lost the last 70 in about 100 days, right? And for those that can't see it now, I'm probably the same weight as I was when I boarded the plane, and maybe plus or minus 5%. Same weight as I was. So total transformation of life, right? And from there, it just my wellness journey kind of developed, right? Whether it's massage therapy, chiropractic, eating different foods, trying to be a little bit more gluten light, but body inflammation, you kind of just grow over time as you want to believe in, living longer but younger.
Mm-hmm.
And starting to have kids at around age 40, I look at when my kid's gonna be 47, I'll be in my mid to late 80s. So can I be in my mid to late 80s with, in good functional shape? And then so one of those parts of that journey, fast forward through everything, and I'll get to my career in a minute, but I stopped doing the whole lifting and went all functional, probably because of you. For those that don't know, but Rick used to license his product to big box gyms. And I got to know him and really subscribe to the type of training that he was doing. And we brought into our gym, and I never wanted to do a sled or a rope, and I never wanted to touch it because that's not how I was trained. And now that's what I exclusively do. I don't do any the traditional weight training, and I know the science behind it, and I learned a lot of that from Rick. But I'll get back there how I got there. But that's been some of the stuff you just refine and you learn over time, and that's not going to change. I mean, it's exercising even through having the kids and not having time with work. It's got to be a core part. And a big part of it for me is you never really take out the fat kid. And so there's the mental part for me with exercise, right? So that's kind of like that was the core. If I went back to my childhood, I was always a born entrepreneur. I always had a baseball card store when I was 12, and used to do card shows around the Northeast all the time during those teenage years. And I kind of flipped to more being with friends and wanted to be focused on school and didn't really do the cards. And then I was in freshman year, I probably got D's and F's on every class. And one of my buddies bet me $100 I couldn't get straight A's the next year. And that was it from there. I just took off academically. Finished first in my class at URI, and always wanted to do kind of the Wall Street thing because I saw what lack of money does to a family, because that happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have any money at all when I started my career. Everything I've made is from myself, and I wanted to I chased the money. I was addicted to kind of that proving the point or whatever that was. So the entrepreneur was put aside, and I wanted to go corporate safe. And corporate safe was a steady paycheck, somewhat knowing what your bonuses will be, even if they could be bigger bonuses. And, didn't want the risk of an entrepreneur. So worked in management consulting for a number of years, learned I worked for a guy that was at McKinsey for a number of years. So he kind of brought the McKinsey practices to what we did. I thought that was incredible learning. But inside of our firm, there was like a corporate finance M&A team, mergers and acquisitions team. So on one hand, I was doing this corporate growth strategy work. On the other side, I'm doing transactional work. And it's great because you get to see all that transactional work. You go into the boardroom and see people make growth decisions around all the work, whether it's acquiring somebody or building. So it was a very unique perspective. The companies were all Fortune 500, so pretty smart people, mostly mostly basic materials and some consumer companies. But didn't really matter the sector. So from there, went to Citigroup in New York and had a very interesting role where I sat on all these investment and oversight committees. But I can say this, I was kind of the young pup with a bunch of gray-haired grizzly veterans, right, that had been 20, 30, 40 years in the street. And, I didn't get their coffee for them, but I was doing all the work for the committees for them. And it was a great learning experience just to sit and listen and be around it. I always say, I saw the 05, 06 glory years, and I was there in 07 and 08, and I have crazy stories that you couldn't even imagine. Was fortunate enough to keep my job through the Great Recession. And one of my closest mentors passed away of pancreatic cancer in 2009, 2008 timeframe, and it crushed me. At the same time, for some reason, it awoke in that little kid entrepreneur in me. I have no idea why. It was a very impactful death for my life. I can't explain it to anybody what the guy meant to me. Definitely a mentor. And I'm still in connection with, there was kind of three of us. I had two bosses. My other boss I still talk to, who now runs equity research at Citigroup. So the entrepreneurs awoken to me, and then interject another friend that Rick knows as well as my first cousin, Glenn. And Glenn had gotten into, he was a kind of a heavy guy working in the car industry, and got into a really fatal car crash. He was really, really bad, should have died, and got pins in his heel, was going to lose his leg. And if anyone in your podcast listens or knows of baseball, but if you think of the Red Sox and Curt Schilling pitched in the bloody sock, the same surgeon that did Curt Schilling's ankle is the same guy that did and saved Glenn's, ankle as well. So Glenn is my first cousin. He got into this concept called Get in Shape for Women. It was a franchise. Maybe there was 50 or so when I heard about it. Glenn was the first franchisee, met with the founder of that, his kitchen table, and they kind of hit it off. And he grew that probably to 8 or 12, or maybe he had 8 of them open when he introduced me to it. I met with the brand. I'm like, you know what? The thing I didn't mention about Glenn is that after his car accident, he became a competitive bodybuilder. So at age 40, he was absolutely shredded. I mean, just very disciplined, loved the life about transformation. And I'm like, wait a minute, I have that story. Like, I have all this education, all this smarts, um, the ability. The one thing I never knew about was salesmanship. I never sold. I just could be authentic and be me and tell my story. And so they couldn't believe it when I resigned from Citigroup. I stayed actually, I was building my first studio ever and doing the reverse commute. First studio I was building was in New Jersey and living in New Jersey. So in the morning at 4:30 in the morning, I would drive into the city and they allowed me to do my morning meetings. And at 8:30, I'd drive back out of the city into New Jersey and go to my studio. And I did that for about 3 or 4 months, which was very taxing. So I opened up these studios, which is primarily focused on women's only. It was for those that understand concepts. It was about 8 women per hour. Average was about $300 a month for an average ticket. Very similar to the Alloy model. I know Rick and I shared notes before we were starting this. Very similar concepts: 1,500 square feet, 1,200 square feet, 1,100 square feet, and I was shocked how well I did. I'm just being honest. I actually kept a spreadsheet, and once in a while I go back because I forget the numbers. Now I haven't forgot it. And over a course of 3 years, I sold 88% of the people I talked to, and they were all pay in full. So my average sale was around $2,400. And
Crazy. That's so crazy.
But again, I didn't think of it as. Let me be very clear. What I was doing was not scalable. Okay.
Right.
My appointments were 2 or 3 hours long. And I was grilling people like where at the end they were kind of begging me to take them onto the program because I had a limited amount of spots and I was over the top. I'd go to the supermarket people, I'd go to houses and yell at the husbands for eating chips in front of their wives. Like we did everything then because I was kind of all in at that time, right? I was what I was going to do, and I was very scared to be an entrepreneur. So it was the best thing I ever did because it gave me so much freedom to work on my weaknesses, strengthen my strengths, and learn so much about oh my God, I can actually be convincing to somebody in an authentic way. Like, I think that you always have to hold on to that authenticity, especially what I do now. So I knew it wasn't scalable. So I knew I had to get away from it because no one I put in could do what I do. And I saw it immediately. The model, I don't even know if it has any units open now. Actually, Glenn had sold. And then together we actually got into a big box gym, did a couple of those. One of the gyms that's how I met Rick, brought his programming into that gym. And ended up selling that gym because it just wasn't enough. Here's what I ended up doing. And this is the God's honest truth to everybody. And again, just trying to be authentic about it. I felt like I could do much, much more than just be a gym owner. And and I don't mean to be pompous about that. I just felt that I was kind of wasting my abilities running a few gyms where I could do something bigger, larger scale. Didn't know what it was going to be at the time of exiting, and had a great return on investment. So successful exits all around. It was really great, but more importantly, I learned a lot during those years. So I sold my last gym in early 2015. My wife and I were getting married about a month or so later in 2015. And I knew that we were just going to focus on trying to have a family. And I said, I'll just take a year off. And I was going to the gym like 3-4 hours a day. And I was just, I can't do this. I have to work. So I kind of messed around, just connecting people, consulting some private equity people, some small business sales, like just not knowing what I was going to do. And then kind of the vision came to me. It was like, on one hand, you got all these investment bankers that are my friends that work at, you know, Harris Williams, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and then all the regional guys like Bard and Jeffries and Wright Piper. And when I did like an informal poll of all managing directors and directors, so all senior leadership at investment banks in the United States, how many of those people have been bankers and successful owner operators of businesses?
Zero.
Zero.
I
And
mean, that is a very unique proposition, especially as we get into what your specialty in M&A.
yeah,
It's like taking both worlds and they collide in the best of ways, right? But it's super unique for sure.
so that was the general thought thesis on the treadmill one day, right? Just like that there's a gap there. The second thing is that founder-led companies were kind of underrepresented, and usually they fall into, I mean, it could be as low as $10 or $20 million of enterprise value, your purchase price or what your company's worth, and it could be as high as $300 million. Now, let me just say, there's a lot more competition for the $300 million one than there's a 50. But the point is that a company producing $3 to $10 million of EBITDA was underserved. And what I thought I could do, again, back to the thesis, was I could bring the banking chops, but also marry it with relatability to the owner, the founder-led company, where I've signed personal guarantees before. I've signed 10-year leases, 15-year leases with guarantees. I drained my 401k and took the huge tax hit penalty for doing so because I believed in myself. No other banker knows that. They don't know what that's like. They don't understand that. And I think there's a ton of relatability for any founder to say, like, well, this guy just gets it. He's been there. He's tried to do it himself. And I also can provide all that, the typical check the boxes, the work you do as a banker. And then the other thing that I don't talk much about, but it's kind of inherent in me, is I was trained to give strategic advice. So the McKinsey training, going back to where it all started in my early 20s, it comes out so much about where I can respectfully disagree with somebody on what their plan or process is. And a lot of times people say, I want to sell my company, and I'll say, now's not the right time. I would wait. And I know in the back of my mind, I can make a pretty nice fee. I could sell that company today, but in the best interest of the client. So I always eliminated the dollars of now, the money part for the work I do, and just give advice the best that what I would do for myself. And just that's the authenticity I talked about earlier, right? It's just to be just real about something. And if you do that, and the other part of my thesis, by the way, is I did some soul searching and asked myself, what work do I love to do? I love doing transactional work. So if you combine all of that, the passion, it's not work, it's kind of like hobby, right? You combine the fact of the chops of being a banker before, you combine that with the fact of relatability, it was going to be extremely successful, just not to the level I thought it would be. It's been way better than I ever thought. And I'm in the same thought and mindset as I was almost 10 years ago when I started it. So the company actually officially started probably 9 years ago or so. And it's been great. Every year has been bigger and larger deals. Now, when I started it, I thought of myself as a generalist. I've been trained in many sectors, but all the inbound calls that came were all related to fitness because, hey, you used to operate fitness. I'm like, well, I can do other stuff, but I became the fitness guy. And then you get into a brand like Planet Fitness or Crunch Fitness or Orange Theory Fitness, and there's franchisees. And then you do good work for one franchisee, and the next person calls you, and then you kind of have a little flywheel with all these franchisee work. And then you have, back in the day, for those that remember, Gold's Gym and all those businesses, right? And I'm like, I kept trying to think to myself, like, hey, guys, I can do all the work. Like, I'm not just a fitness guy, but, that's kind of been, I was kind of dubbed the fitness guy. Where when someone asked me today, what is it that we do? We're effectively, if you're trying to sell your company, you hire us, sell side, to represent you. That could be 100% of your company, or we call it recapitalization, 60, 70%, or minority of your company. And there's different things and philosophies around each of them, or different needs around each of them. But 99% of our work is that work. Somebody wants to monetize what they have. And we know who all the investors are, whether it's private equity or strategic buyers, right? And I would say there's a small percentage of, if Blackstone or one of the larger shops called us to do some buy side work, we would, be like an industry expert to that process,
right,
and help them close the deal. I think in the past, Rick, I've done some consulting alongside you, just in operationally and thinking about things financially of starting a business. So we don't do really that type of work now, because we don't do hourly work. We're kind of tied to success fees of, if you represent you. Sometimes we take a retainer, but really our bulk of our dollars come in through the success of a recapitalization or a sale. And the process can take time, right? 6 months, 9 months, depending on where the markets are. So that's basically what the name of my company is, MOK Advisors. It's just my initials, Micheal Okumian, MOK. That's where the name came from. There's 4 of us now. We usually around 4 to 5 people. We do 4 to 6 deals a year. I would say lately deal sizes have been more like 50 to 200 million. But those first couple of years on my kitchen table when the kids were babies, we would do $5 to $10 million deals. And been very successful for the most part. Everything we work on, we tend to sell. The one thing we're always doing is selling our time. So it's all about opportunity cost, right? We don't want to take on a project, spend 3-4 months on it, and have no outcome because we don't get paid.
Right. Well, tell me this. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So when you're engaging with someone, so say you've got a franchisor or a franchisee group with multiple units that are successful, they're doing well. What do you look for? Like, how do you advise someone on valuing their business? Because I know there's lots of things to look at. There's EBITDA, maybe it's the leadership group, it's the runway of the sector that they're in. Like, can you give me any just transparency on what, again, just high level stuff, because I know it's nuanced, but what are some main factors that you look at when you're helping value a business?
Let me start with the basics.
Okay.
I think most people that buy into a franchise system, such as Alloy, and I would say this even before you started building your company, with any franchise, I think most franchisees should think about their business as being a multiple of profitability, or EBITDA you mentioned. And I think they should think of it from a range of 2 to 4 times. Just go into the investment thinking about it that way, right?
So just for layman's terms, just to make sure, right? That would be down the road, if you want to exit or sell your investment, you would get 2 to 4 times EBITDA or profit, correct? As a general rule.
As a general rule, for somebody who's not fully scaled, built out, right? If you got a couple units of something, of any franchise, I would even include food in some instances. Now, some brands are different, right? And some brands are extremely successful, which means that if somebody's larger scaled in the system, you might move that 2 to 4 up a bit, but it's never going to go much higher. Maybe 5 times, maybe 6, maybe 5.
So if someone has 50 units, say, in a brand, say they have 50 Alloy locations, they want to roll them up, right, and take them to market, and you help them with that, they could expect somewhat reliably at least a 5x. And there are some times when you get more if there's undeveloped territories that come along with that, so there's more runway for the investor. I know there's some other triggers, but that using, say, a 5, if you had multiples, and that's usually how we coach franchisees, because listen, we've got a lot of savvy franchisees that come into the Alloy system and they're like, hey, if we ever want to exit this, what does that look like? And I'm like, well, if you're just, Bill's Gym, you'd be lucky to get a 3, more like a 2. And if you have a cluster of really well-run clubs, yeah, you can go 3 to 5, maybe more if there's some other extenuating circumstance. If you have 50 really well-run locations, you got regional management in place, and it's a different ballgame, right? So there's just lots of factors.
And by the way, there's more upside. We'll get to like the levers that you pull to drive the multiple, right?
Right.
On EBITDA. But I always like to say that as a general rule of thumb of anybody. When I bought into a franchise system before, I was like, you go on these websites, the business brokerage websites, and you'd see guys got 2 or 3 units, it's 2 times, or 3 times, or 4, asking 4, but they sold for 3, or asking 3, sold for 2. So I always just said that's just a general to always think. I always look at things with reasonable expectations, right? So if I set the floor a little bit lower and out deliver, that's a good thing, right? Now you touched on a few things there, but what levers pull and what drives value, right? So you mentioned a few. Management team in place, so that means you're spending a lot of money on corporate G&A. So you have 50 units of alloy. You've got a fully kind of a corporate team, and then you have your what I call your studio team, right? People that are the GM of the studio that are running that particular studio. You might have regional people above a cluster of studios, but those would be corporate employees. So building out a team, right? The other part is, and I think what I always loved about the alloy model is a successful model. I mean, Rick built a model here that, in my opinion, is a really solid model and great return on your investment. It's a big part. So what does that all mean? Well, let's assume alloy keeps clicking away what it's doing and it's just getting better and better, and right. And you can open it for X amount of dollars. And what are you quoting in your FDD, Rick, as a what's the range to open one?
Yeah, look, high range is like low 500s, low range is like 200. So
Okay.
that's sort of the range. It's a big range, but as you can imagine, Jared and I did a podcast for this. If somebody, it depends on landlords, honestly. Like, well, we're not going to let you get into a bad lease, but let's say you have to build out a cold dark shell and you get zero participation in that. It's going to artificially drive up our item 7 range because there may be an outlier there, which we can notate and discuss. But then you might get 3 years rent abatement. So you still got a good lease at the end of the day. It's just that the landlord couldn't fund any of the build out. Maybe they were tight on cash. So they gave you 3 years free rent, something like that. So there's things to consider even in that number, but let's just say for the sake of this, low 5s to 2 as an example.
Yeah. Okay. So, but the bottom line is actually the number doesn't matter, because at the end of the day is, everyone that the unit level economics work in your model, period. The more they work in your model, then the more valuable this white space or territory underdeveloped becomes, right? And so how does that work? Let me give an example of a scaled, and I'll do like a pre-COVID thing, right?
Okay. Yep.
So Orange Theory Fitness built out to about 1,400 studios before COVID, right? And they did that really quickly. First private equity got into the system probably in 2018. So maybe like 4 years after. At the franchisee level, the franchisor had traded with Rourke, and they did a minority deal. But the franchisee, first one was done. It was, I think, 12 studios to start. And if you ask me, like, what did the person pay for those? They probably paid on your last 12 months of EBITDA, like go back 12 months, they probably paid 11, 12 times. And the reason for that is if you took, once all those 12 studios matured and they hit their growth curve, whether, usually in the fitness industry, we use 24 months by year 2, right? Then they're only paying 7 or 8 times. But they get all this white space that comes along with it. And if their boxes cost $600,000 to build at the time, and you would debt finance half of it with equipment, right? So let's say you put in $200,000 or $300,000 of equity in each unit you'd build. At that time, you'd almost do $300,000 or $400,000 in some cases in the first year of EBITDA. So let's use simple math and say it's 1 times year 1 EBITDA is what you're building it for. Okay. So if you paid 10 times for the first 12 and you built the next 12 at 1 times, You now have 24 boxes, and your multiple is 1 plus 10 divided by 2, 5.5 times is your entry multiple.
Right.
And then if you keep building at 1 times, now you have 48 of them. Well, the first 12 you pay 10 times for, it doesn't matter anymore because now you're into it 3.5 times.
Right.
And then now you've got that scaled up big team, and you could sell that for 8 to 10 times. And your entry is only 3 or 4 because of all that. That's why it matters, the return on investment. Right. And then the system really matters. So once Alloy becomes in every neighborhood in America, like, let's plug there for you. That the success of that actually helps the rising tide of all boats. The success
rising
of
tide raises all ships. That's what we say.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because it's interesting when we bring that up, say at Discovery Day, which is the last step in the awarding process. And we always say we're headed for 800 locations by 2030. We were on pace, looks like maybe to get there a bit early. And I think, the normal reaction is concern around support, which I understand, and we can address that. We have hiring triggers for positions to stay just ahead, right, of the growth for support. But I really hope that people heard you and that they understand that, like, listen, it's a really good thing if we get to that number for return on your investment. And so, yes, we're going to support you. More importantly, maybe whether you plan to hold or not, right? You would love the option to sell if you could, but the value of your investment is going to be much higher if we have 800 units in market. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, it works both ways, right? The success of the brand, it only strengthens the franchisee. I mean, we saw it. So, by the way, let me trickle that down. So you had that first private equity transaction, and then you had a second private equity transaction at the franchisee level. And of course, it was around similar because they did the same math I just gave you on the cocktail napkin, right? And it just, the model worked. Let's just keep building them. Then the third group came in, and the fourth group came in. So what ended up happening is you had 6 to 8 groups in there looking to buy up as much as they could. So somebody that had 2 units in their hometown market might be able to sell that for 5 or 6 times now. Even though, when I go back to what I originally said, normally you get 2, 3, maybe 4. You're getting 5 or 6, and you don't even have to market it or hire anybody to sell it for you. They'll come to you and agree on a number that works. And that's when you'd start to see is it was worth it. And then because maybe they have some development rights they could buy. The other part that I would say, we talked about levers, a management team having a high enough level of EBITDA, because that allows more debt to be put on the business, which levers returns. The other part too is once you sell out of territory, in this particular case, Alloy sells out of territory, the only way to get it is to buy it through a franchisee.
Right.
So you might be worth 3 or 4 times, but if the model's really good, if you own 12 or 20 more rights to develop, well, maybe I can pay you 6 or 7 times for the same math I gave you before. I'll pay you 6 or 7 times. You're happy. And I get all these, these territories that I wanted that I'm going to develop at 1 or 2 times.
Right.
And I'm going to average that 6 or 7 down to 3 or 4.
Yep.
And then I'm going to try to sell for 6 or 7 when I sell my scaled business.
Right. Yep. Makes sense. Yeah, interesting. That's the franchisee side. And I know that you do work on the franchisor side. We won't really dig into that so much today because I think this will be very helpful for our franchisees who are looking at this strictly as an investment. We have a lot of savvy franchisees that come to us with, some have a lot of franchise experience, some own a lot of real estate, short-term rentals, multifamily housing, long-term rental. I mean, they're looking for the return on investment formula. So I think they'll really enjoy hearing that part. Like, again, it's a high level, but I think it does explain in the most simple way, like, hey, as the system grows, the better off you're going to be. So run good units, right, and promote the brand and be a brand ambassador, because the bigger it gets, the better you're going to be, the better your investment. Where do you see moving forward opportunities in the health and wellness space? Because I know that you look at a lot of deals and you're constantly looking at valuations and trends, and that's a big part of what you do. And I feel like you do a really good job at that. Where do you see opportunities in the foreseeable future for the health and wellness space?
It's a Great question. We actually get it a lot. I think most people that follow the space, well, maybe they don't, but the market's kind of like segmented, pretty clear buckets. Boutique studios, one big group, and then big box gyms and the other big section, right? And maybe there's a little bit of crossover in the middle, but for the most part, that's it. And in the big box gym space, I'd say it's kind of like now it's kind of a tale of two cities. The middle guy, the $40 a month gym guy, has kind of been squeezed out. Everyone can think about Gold's Gym, 24-hour fitness, LA Fitness, things that have kind of come down over time. Town Sports International, like all those kind of middle market guys have been squeezed out. You have the Equinoxes and Lifetimes over here, and then you have the low cost, or what they call as high volume, low price HVLP model over here, Planet Fitness being the biggest.
Right.
So you've definitely had that barbell approach the last decade. That's the big box side. Boutique side, it's been tough the last few years. And, something that's not talked about a lot, or probably enough, and I've been on this on over 100 podcasts or equity research calls or talking to hedge funds or whoever I talk to. I've said this from day one since COVID. I think there was something, and again, depending on mentality of which state you live in and fear factor of a virus or things like that, I think the biggest challenge on boutique studios that wasn't talked about enough was just sheer size of square footage of your box. Just that simple. And in the big box space, it was more just a matter of time to come back. If you have a good model, everything came back. But it's easier when you have 35,000 square feet or 50,000 square feet and you were worried about a virus. You can kind of find a spot not near people. And it took a while for group classes to come back in the big boxes as well. On the boutique side, I think of something like Orange Theory that was the darling for a good 7 years. And a lot of the reason that profitability I mentioned earlier were they were basically running what they call a 3G class, which is 36 people an hour. So if you have a 3,200 square foot box where some of that is front desk and your, other swag that you sell, your square footage of your workout space is what, 1,800 square feet? I mean, whatever it is, right? Because you have showers and things like that. 36 people cycling through, sweating next to each other, running hard during a pandemic inside this box. On the flip side, the hottest trend the last 5 years in boutique fitness has been Pilates. And if you think about that, if you're on a reformer, you're sort of in your little bubble, not near anybody.
Right.
And people always kind of felt safe to be in your own little bubble in 2020 or 2021. Again, depending on which market you live in, some people didn't care during the whole time. But I always thought that was like a simple, rational consumer reaction, right?
Right. Yeah. You're saying that, like, we try to keep the floor space at about 1,000 square feet. So if you can imagine 36 people in 1,500 square feet, the reason that we fared well during that time, it was a max of 6 people in 1,000 square feet. So you could space people out. You could put the equipment right in front of them. They wouldn't have to share the equipment. Yeah.
Set up your own rope, your own kettlebell, you do your own little pod, right?
Yep, exactly.
And it was kind of built for that. And that's what's great. And I used to run small group training studios, and I like the model a lot. And so, yes, the other thing too is, so we have the pandemic impact on boutique studios, this whole other thing, right? And then we go right into an inflationary environment. And whereas the $150, the $300, whatever that payment was more than the $20 gym. Right. Consumer got squeezed after 2022 when stimulus checks came out. Things started to fizzle out, right? And the consumer felt the pinch. Inflation went up for all the stuff people read in the news and things like that are all applicable. So a lot of boutique studios not only had to deal with the fact of this virus in a small environment, and the government regulations in different states and counties, but also had to deal with the fact that consumers started getting pinched at a higher price ticket, right?
Right. Well, I would say mid-price, because if you bifurcate big box has its upper and lower range. As you know, boutique has its upper and lower range. So we get that
100%.
question a lot, like, what about another hiccup in the economy? It's like, well, I've been in business for 34 years. I was in business through the 9/11, which was a small hiccup, certainly 08, 07, 08. And we grew through all of those because we're really attacking or targeting the very upper crust, right, of the boutique market at say $400 a month. And they are relatively insulated from these ups and downs just because they have they have a lot more resources, and they're also smarter than the average bear. So if you're looking at a 25-year-old that's really squeezing $175 a month out of their budget to go to a class-based concept, which that's their target market, it's a completely different avatar than a 52-year-old guy who, or lady who's really well off, whose kids are already in college or out, and they've just got a ton of resources, right? So it's just even within boutique fitness, it can be vastly different.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I guess I was making the comment of more that $100 to $200 type range that I've seen the biggest impact in, because I think you see a lot of the class-based, the trade-off going back to the gym, right?
Yep.
So I think that's what I was more talking about. You're 100% correct. Now, the number one category that I like going forward, because I have a little bit of concerns on Pilates. I think Pilates is a great workout. Solid Core just had another great outcome. Their unit level economics are fantastic. Club Pilates is fantastic. Great unit level numbers. My wife does Pilates. I know a lot of women that do Pilates. Not a lot of men, but that's okay. And it's a good marketplace. But there's a part of me that thinks over time, does that get a little faddish? People are always worried about their boutique. The only one modality, if I'm using the term correctly, is that I've seen that's been tried and true for probably 40 years or maybe longer, has been strength training. And that's where I think, to me, that's the differentiator of Alloy, and knowing Rick's programming. We have all these GLP-1s and all these other things out there. Now the research is coming out where you can lose a ton of weight using these. But the thing that people always say is you need strength training, So those drugs aren't going away. So you're going to have to do strength training. And for those people that, even though you're attacking the higher crust or the higher level disposable income customer, which tend to be more sticky, by the way,
right,
because they don't get impacted by losing a job, or that just doesn't usually happen. But the other factor too is that I'm speaking from somebody that actually does one-on-one training. So I now have a trainer. I never thought I would. But what's better, what I would actually prefer if the times worked for me, I'd want to be in a small group because of the accountability to one another.
right.
And having been in that business before, the appointment with accountability to other people is everything. And doing strength training, you can do cardio in a lot of different variety of things, but doing strength training is something that's just going to be a continued trend. We see it. The other thing I like about the industry we talk about all the time is the pie is really growing. Right. So traditionally, just rough numbers here, if you've got 350 million people in the US, the participation rate's been around 20 or 22%. You got to factor in the Eisenhower generation's aged out. The boomers are aging out. Those younger millennials are getting older, getting more disposable income. So you're now going to be in a time where, yes, the low cost guys will win with their $20 a month gyms to get people off the couch. But the demographics are starting to rise where those younger people grow up in a different world of where health and wellness and part of your wallet's being spent on that.
Right.
So that 20, 22% could be 30, 40% in 10 or 15 years.
Right.
And then you start to say, well, what about all this other competition? It doesn't matter then. Because if you're that many people, 350 million people at 30 or 40%, you can have 800 alloys or more.
Right. Yeah.
right?
And I mean, really, a lot of people ask, like, who is your direct competition? And there's not very many one-on-one training franchises because the margins stink. It's not a great business model. There's a
Right.
plethora of class-based, and through the consumer's lens, they look similar. Like I can row, or I can cycle, or I can run.
Yep.
Again, just and even the science, and this, Michael, around measuring how many calories you burn during a workout. Even that is sort of, again, we're moving beyond that, where it's like you're trying to create an ecosystem of fat loss. Again, it's all basically centered around strength. And to your point with the GLP-1s, like for anybody that's listening, Ozempic, semaglutide, whatever you want to call it, it was just approved for kids as young as 6, I believe, which, listen, say what you want about that, but it's not going anywhere. Big Pharma's behind it, big money. And everybody, whether it be Peter Attia or any of the other anti-aging experts or just health experts, will say, if you don't do strength training while you're on this drug, you're going to lose a good deal of your weight. It's going to be muscle mass, which is catastrophic for your health, your strength, especially if you're older. It's just not good. It's not good for your metabolism. And so, like, the only way to mitigate that is strength training. There's not a pill for that or a shot for that. And so it sets us up well with the current trends, at least for the foreseeable future, 5 to 10 years. And to your point, it's been 40 years. It's always been part of a program, right? So that's why we always caution people, like, be careful with a single modality or something that's based on a piece of science or technology that can be disrupted. Because as a franchisee, you're getting into a 10-year agreement, right? And you see that. Look,
Yep.
I think Orange Theory was a strong brand. I know they're still off about 20%, right? And it's like
Or more.
people move your cheese pretty quickly. And of course, they merged with, self-esteem brands, and now it's driven brands or purpose brands, I believe. Yeah, purpose brands. And so, again, just rationally look at markets. Would you rather be servicing the upper end of the market or the lower end of the market, right? And then what is your offering? And with a brand promise of accountability and specificity, if there's a new tool or technology, we can bring it in behind our brand promise. It's always going to be strength focused, but we can bring those things in, and those can change over time as science and technology and everything changes. We'll continue to adapt, but we don't base the whole brand on those things, which could easily be disrupted. So it's just something to look at. And again, that's just my take on it. Obviously, selfishly, it's like it speaks really well to the Alloy brand, but I wouldn't have gone to franchising if I didn't believe in it that much, right?
Yeah. And I was a proponent back when you had the licensing that you should franchise it, because I thought it was you had a lot of credibility from the 34, 35 years of being successful in the industry. The other thing I like about the Alloy model is, the strength part of it's great. Know your background leading the ship is great. But the studios that I used to run, it was only about 130 to 200 members or clients.
Yeah, we're 130 to 150.
Yeah. So there's, once I got past like 170, it was almost like too many. And I don't mean to like not make money, but so the 120 to 170, 130 to 170, and I know your model's like that, but it was very similar to me. Having been somebody who ran those in the workout clothes and sneakers every day for 3 years, I did the work myself. I know you can have first name basis and very good understanding of each of your clients and their progression. And there's something that I've always said about this type of model that Rick's running. It's not small group personal training. It's individual personal training in a small group.
Yeah,
and I think
so nuanced. I love it.
But it's truth, right? Because a good trainer can handle 6-on-1. Actually, I'd argue a good trainer could probably do 8-to-1, a little bit harder. But 6
we
to
tried
1,
it. It starts to feel like a class, even with the best trainers. Just what we found.
But I'm just, I get that. I get how it could be. I guess I was thinking more of like high school athletes or something like something like that, right? You could do 8. Right. Than this. But anyway, I think that's the beauty of the model is its simplicity. You only need 150, and by the way, you can get there really fast. Then your job becomes just keeping them, servicing the hell out of them, and then you just focus on retention.
Yep.
And it should be that if you do it right, and like I know in my studios we did it right, people won't leave.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's, again, one of our claims is just really good retention, really low attrition, which is really nice because that means on the front end, less marketing spend. less just general activity, which means less manpower to follow up with those leads. And I mean, a lot of these boutique brands, you're losing 40, adding 50 to net grow by 10, but that's a lot of activity around that too. So there's these other, I wouldn't say hidden costs, but a little bit maybe harder to calculate how much manpower is put into that, how much attention, and that all pulls away from the attention to the main thing, which is like, hey, we're in the fitness business. Let's just do fitness and do it really well. Look, man, I appreciate it. How can people get a hold of you? I don't want people bombarding you, obviously, because you're only taking deals like 50 million or more now. So it's like some of our listeners will be like, great, I've got a mom and pop gym I want to sell. It's like, Michael's probably not going to talk to you about that, not because he's not a nice guy, but he's just doing bigger things. But if people just want to learn more about you or the company in general, how would they get a hold of you? Is it
I
MOK?
would just just go to the website, MOK Advisors. That's VORS.com. You could Google search myself, Micheal Okumian, and find out a little bit about us and what we do. Yeah, that's true. I appreciate you saying that because my heart is still that owner operator, and most of the time we get those calls, it's just too small. And here's what I mean by that is the buyer groups we work with, I don't have a match for it. So it's not like I wouldn't work with you or you wouldn't pay my fee. It'd be a waste of both our time because I don't have, for something small, I don't have the way to match it, right? And as time has gone on, I've got less and less of those people now. It's been more larger people and connecting, and we spend most of our time talking to consumer investors in private equity or strategic guys that are trying to deploy a lot of capital. But once they get some scale, I'd love to talk to somebody because I think could be a good concept to roll up over time.
Yep.
I believe you're going to close in on 100 units before you know it. So
we'll have 100 open probably about mid Q1, which is great. Well, look, man, I appreciate it.
Successful.
Glad to see you as always, and I appreciate you sharing your story. It is very unique because you have a fitness background. And you also have an investment analytical background as well. And those are just two things you don't see very often. So it does make you perfect for this space. And I think certainly for our franchisees that are looking to do multiple units and have their eyes on 50 studios at some point down the road, they can get a better idea of what that would look like if they did take those to market. So I appreciate it, man. Talk soon. Cheers.